My name is Loretta Monroe. I'm 71 years old, a widow, and the founder of Monroe Strategic Group, a business I built from scratch in Charleston, South Carolina. I've spent the better part of my life raising a daughter, signing checks with her name on them, and convincing myself that love was something you proved by giving. But this past Mother's Day changed everything. I was invited, formally, not warmly, to my daughter Marissa's in-laws' home. There, I watched her give Vivian, her mother-in-law, a $35,000 diamond ring and a cruise to the Caribbean. Vivian cried. The guests applauded. Then Marissa walked over to me and handed me a plastic flower and a store-bought card. "Thanks for everything," it said. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a mother in her eyes. I was an open wallet in the shape of a person. You're listening to this story on Renvenge Zinnia, where truths that were once buried get told in the voice of those who lived them. If you've ever sat in silence while your heart was breaking, or if you've ever wondered when it would finally be your turn to matter, this story is for you. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, I invite you to subscribe. I promise you're not alone here. I drove home. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I just sat in my office surrounded by 30 years of paperwork and started calculating everything I had ever given, not because I wanted it back, but because I finally needed to see what I was truly worth. To the one person I gave everything to, it was the kind of spring day Charleston is famous for. Warm air moving off the river, Spanish moss rustling like whispers through the oaks. I wore my best linen dress and the string of pearls Franklin had given me on our 30th anniversary. They never left my jewelry box these days, but something about that Sunday felt heavier, a formality I couldn't quite name. The invitation had come from my daughter the night before, in a tone as cold as it was polite. "Brunch is at Vivian's tomorrow, 1 o'clock. You should come." Not "we'd love to see you, Mom," or even "it would mean a lot." Just, "you should come." Like a calendar alert, not a gesture of affection. I arrived at exactly 1 p.m. because I was raised to respect time, even when time no longer respected me. Vivian Lowell's home sat like a postcard on the waterfront, a gleaming, white-columned house with wraparound porches and a backyard that stretched right down to the water's edge. There were sailboats bobbing behind the hedges, and laughter that didn't need me to arrive in order to begin. The driveway was lined with European cars. Inside, a waiter in black slacks offered guests champagne with sugared rims. The kind of gathering where everyone's voice had just a little too much polish, and everyone's smile was practiced enough to hold secrets behind it. I stepped through the side gate, and there they were, seated beneath a large white tent in the backyard. Vivian, elegant as always in a lemon-colored sundress, held court at the center of the table. Her silver hair was swept into one of those effortless buns that said, "I still matter." Marissa sat right beside her, close enough for their heads to touch when they laughed. And they did. Laugh, often and loudly, as if they were actresses in a commercial for generational bonding. Ethan was at the grill, tongs in hand, flipping steaks like a man who'd never made a mistake. His mother had raised him well, apparently. Vivian saw me first. She didn't rise. She simply offered a smooth, rehearsed smile and said, "Loretta, so glad you could make it." Marissa glanced up, nodded once. "Hi, Mom, you can sit over there," she said, pointing to an empty chair at the far end of the table, near the edge of the shade where the breeze couldn't quite reach. I took my seat, alone and politely ignored. There were people at that table I'd never met. Neighbors, friends of the Lowells, someone from Vivian's Bridge Club, a woman with pearls big enough to have a mortgage. Everyone knew everyone else. Stories floated like bubbles above their heads. I just listened, offering a smile when someone glanced my way. But mostly, I sipped from my water glass and stared at the tablecloth, counting the stitched flowers like they might give me strength. Then came the gift giving. Marissa stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the stone patio. Her voice lifted with a kind of joy I hadn't heard from her in years. "Vivian," she announced, "we wanted to do something special for you this year." Ethan appeared beside her, holding a small velvet box in one hand and a silver envelope in the other. The moment looked staged, like a Hallmark commercial, choreographed and pristine. Vivian opened the box first. Inside was a diamond ring, square cut, brilliant, set in platinum. It caught the sunlight and fractured it across the table like glass. She gasped, "Oh, Marissa, this is too much." "It's not too much," Marissa said, her voice soft with reverence. "Not for the woman who raised the man I love." They embraced. Applause broke out. Vivian looked like royalty, touched, emotional, radiant. Then Marissa handed over the envelope. 3 weeks in the Caribbean, she beamed. "First-class suite, balcony views. You deserve a break." Vivian's hand flew to her chest, as if her heart couldn't handle such generosity. "I've never—" she began but couldn't finish. She was crying now. Ethan pulled her into another hug. Someone clapped again. Someone else said, "This is what family looks like." Someone toasted with champagne. I sat there, still as the porcelain plates on the table, waiting for the moment to pass. And then Ethan turned toward me. "And now for Loretta," he said. "Not Mom, not even Mother, just Loretta." His voice was cheerful but clipped, like he'd almost forgotten I existed. Marissa walked over to me carrying a small, crinkled gift bag, one of those generic floral things you grab from the impulse rack at the checkout line. She placed it in front of me and gave a small nod. I reached in and pulled out a plastic flower, the kind that smells faintly of the warehouse it came from. The petals were bright red, too red, unnaturally red, and beneath it, a small greeting card. It wasn't sealed. Inside, the printed words read, "Happy Mother's Day." Below that, in Marissa's handwriting, "Thanks for everything, Mom." That was it. No memory, no sentiment, not even a signature. For a moment, I said nothing. The table had grown quiet, the way tables do when everyone knows something impolite is unfolding. I cleared my throat. "It's lovely," I said, forcing my voice not to shake. "Thank you, dear." But she had already turned back to Vivian, already smiling again, already laughing. The moment was over. I stayed for another 45 minutes, long enough to finish my plate, long enough to pretend I didn't notice that not one person asked me a follow-up question, long enough to see Marissa massage Vivian's shoulders and say, "We'll help you pack for the cruise." When I said I needed to leave, Marissa looked up just long enough to say, "Drive safe, Mom." No hug, no photo, no offer to walk me out. I walked back to my car alone. The fake flower sat on the passenger seat beside me, and for the entire drive home, I couldn't stop staring at it. It wasn't just that it was cheap, it was that it had been chosen with no thought, no reflection, no care. I couldn't stop asking myself, when had my daughter stopped seeing me? When did she stop trying? Back at home, the house was still. The light had shifted. I stepped into my office. Franklin's old desk still in the corner, the wall of photos behind me, and I placed the flower on the bookshelf beside the diploma I'd framed when Marissa graduated from Duke. The same diploma I'd paid $132,000 for. The same one I'd cried over when she walked across the stage. I sat down in the armchair across the room. For a long time, I didn't move. I just listened to the silence. So loud, so thick, it was almost alive. A part of me still wanted to make excuses. She's tired, she's overwhelmed, she meant well. But another part, the part that had been quietly dying for years, spoke up. "No, Loretta, that was deliberate. That was who you are to her now. And that's when it began. Not the anger, not the grief. Something colder, clearer. The realization that love, when taken for granted long enough, starts to rot. And that I had spent too many years mistaking obligation for connection." I looked at the flower one last time before turning off the light. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll open the files. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't anger that kept me awake. It wasn't even sadness. It was something deeper, like a quiet ache behind the ribs, pulsing every time I remembered the way Marissa handed me that flower, like she was tipping a waitress, like I hadn't poured decades of my life into her. At 3:17 a.m., I gave up on sleep and padded barefoot down the hall to my office. That room had always been a place of focus, of numbers and growth and signed contracts. The desk was solid walnut, worn at the corners from years of late-night work. The shelves were full of neat rows of labeled file boxes, everything from old tax returns to client case studies. But that night, it became something else. I opened the cabinet labeled Personal, Marissa, and I began to count, not out of bitterness, out of necessity. Because somewhere along the line, I had lost track of where motherhood ended and silent financing began. The first file was labeled Duke University, Tuition. Inside, I found every receipt for Marissa's 4 years at school. Tuition statements, dorm fees, bookstore charges. There was even an invoice for a $400 parking pass she'd complained about once and then forgot entirely. The final total, $132,000. I remembered the day she got her acceptance letter. We danced around the kitchen like children, laughing until our stomachs hurt. She had tears in her eyes. "I'll make you proud, Mom," she'd said. I guess I just didn't realize that promise had an expiration date. Next came the wedding folder. It was thick, much thicker than I remembered. There were brochures for venues, caterers, dress fittings, photographers. I flipped through them slowly, each page a reminder of how deeply I'd wanted that day to be perfect. Not for show, for her. There was a receipt from Magnolia Gardens, $28,000 just for the venue and floral arrangements. The catering invoice was $17,500. The dress, custom made, $6,300. The photographer's package, $4,800. I kept going. The band, the transportation, the cake tasting, the custom napkins with their initials printed in gold foil. The total, $97,000. I remembered writing those checks without blinking. I told myself I was giving her a fairy tale. No one else offered to help, not Ethan's parents, not even Marissa. I paid it all, quietly, because that's what mothers do. Or at least, that's what I believed. Then I opened the file labeled Battery House Mortgage. Marissa and Ethan had wanted to buy a home in the historic Battery District after the wedding. Something grand close to the water with iron gates and magnolia trees. But their income wouldn't stretch far enough. So they asked me to co-sign. Just to help get approved, they'd said. The truth is, I did more than co-sign. 6 months in, when Ethan's marketing firm hit a rough patch, the mortgage payments started slipping. Late fees added up. Marissa called me crying. "We'll lose the house, Mom. It's our dream home. We just need time." I covered the payments for 9 months, quietly, through automatic transfer, using a business sub-account so it wouldn't show up obviously in our family ledger. Total assistance, $152,000. I closed that folder and sat back. That would have been enough for most people, but not for me. I kept digging. There were smaller files, each one a little cut. Auto loans, Marissa and Ethan, 3 SUVs over the past decade, each one, just until we're back on our feet. The down payments, insurance premiums, and 6 to 12 months of catch-up payments when they fell behind. One of the vehicles was even under my name, just to get them a better rate. Total auto-related support, $62,000. I rubbed my temples. My eyes were burning. And then I found it. A manila envelope labeled simply EL Tax Issue, 2020. I opened it and the memories came back fast. Ethan's firm had been flagged for improper deductions. They'd hired the wrong accountant. The IRS was circling. Panic set in. Marissa showed up at my door, white-faced and shaking. "He trusted the wrong guy, Mom. We could lose everything, his business, our reputation." I wired $210,000 that same week. No questions asked, no paperwork, no payback plan. I didn't even tell my lawyer. I just fixed it. like I always did, all totaled, $728,000, not counting birthdays, holidays, braces, private summer camps, college application consultants, her first car at 16, or the countless grocery runs when money was just tight this month. I sat there in the quiet, surrounded by papers, my hands trembling, not from rage, but from clarity. I had financed their lives for over 2 decades. I had erased emergencies before they made it to their doorstep. I had stitched together gaps they never knew existed. And in doing so, I had unintentionally taught them that I would always be there, always fix it, always say yes, until now. Because yesterday, I got a $3.99 flower and a card that said, "Thanks for everything." Not "thank you for the house we live in," not "thank you for saving our business," not "thank you for giving me the kind of life most people only dream of," just "thanks for everything." That was when it hit me. The most painful part wasn't the money. I had earned it. I had more than I needed. I gave because I loved. No, the real pain was realizing that my love had become invisible, that my generosity wasn't kindness in their eyes. It was expected, like water from a faucet, useful until the pressure dropped. I picked up my phone and scrolled back through my last year of texts with Marissa. They were all one-way requests. "Can you watch the kids next week?" "Do you have any extra tax folders at the office?" "Ethan needs the truck again." Never once. "How are you, Mom?" Never once. "Do you need anything?" I clicked into my online banking, the mortgage payment on their house, still coming out of my business account. I'd set it up years ago to auto-deduct. I hadn't thought about it since. I pulled up the contracts on Ethan's business. 3 of my commercial properties still used his firm for landscaping, at a premium rate, no less. I was paying him 25% above market because I wanted him to feel capable. I opened the files on my daughter's bookkeeping job for a few of my smaller clients. I was paying her $1,500 a month for less than 6 hours of work. They weren't just my family, they were my dependents, not by legal definition, but by lifestyle. And I had allowed it. I closed the laptop, slowly, intentionally. The air in my office felt different now, still, but heavier, like something sacred had just cracked. I turned toward the photo wall behind me. There were framed articles, awards, and handshakes from 20 years of business milestones. But the most recent picture of me and Marissa, dated 2017, 5 years ago. She'd stopped taking pictures with me long before she stopped thanking me, and I had mistaken that absence for her being busy, tired, preoccupied, the way mothers excuse everything because the alternative, that your child just stopped caring, is too painful to face until you finally do. That night, I didn't cry. I did something else. I called my lawyer, because it was time to stop doing what I'd always done and start becoming someone I'd nearly forgotten how to be, a woman who makes choices for herself. The following morning, I woke up before the sun, already dressed in my mind before my feet hit the floor. I poured coffee into a ceramic mug with a chipped handle, one Franklin used to call his thinking cup. It seemed fitting. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the sky move from gunmetal gray to soft gold, and tried to name what I was feeling. It wasn't rage. Rage burns hot, fast. What I felt was slower, colder. The kind of stillness that comes after a long winter storm, quiet but dangerous. By 8 a.m., I had called Giselle Porter's office and requested a meeting. She'd been my attorney for over a decade, handled our estate planning, Franklin's trust, even the property paperwork when I expanded the business into North Carolina. Smart, measured, and someone who didn't flinch when emotions entered the room. Her office sat on the 21st floor of the Bank of America Tower downtown. The view stretched out over Charleston Harbor, but I wasn't here for the scenery. When I arrived, Giselle stood to greet me, her blouse crisp and her eyes sharp behind gold-rimmed glasses. "Loretta," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her, "you look tired." I gave a tired smile in return. That's because I am. She poured me a cup of tea without asking, then settled into her seat. What's on your mind? I took a long breath, letting it fill the hollow space between my ribs. I'm thinking about selling Monroe Strategic Group. Her brows lifted, just slightly. Not shocked, but definitely surprised. You've spent 30 years building that firm. It's your legacy. I nodded. That's the problem. She set her pen down. Walk me through it. And so I did. I told her about the mortgage payments, the cars, the business bailouts, the $728,000 I'd tallied just the night before. I told her about the fake flower on my bookshelf, about the silence that followed my daughter's name when it used to bring music. I told her what it felt like to be thanked with a clearance aisle card while someone else got champagne and diamonds. But what I told her most, what I needed her to understand, was that I no longer knew if my daughter loved me or the access I gave her. I've become a resource, I said quietly, a line item on their lifestyle plan. I don't think Marissa sees me as a mother anymore. I think she sees me as a guarantee. Giselle didn't interrupt. She just listened, her face unreadable, until I finally ran out of words. Then she said, "You're not wrong." I blinked. I thought you'd try to talk me out of it. She shook her head. Loretta, I've watched you carry other people's weight for as long as I've known you. Your name is on every rescue, every plan, every last-minute fix. If this is the moment you finally choose yourself, I'm not going to get in your way. I'm going to help you make it clean. I nodded once, not because it felt triumphant, because it felt necessary. She opened her notepad. There are firms in New York that specialize in acquiring privately held consulting companies. They buy quietly, restructure, and keep the client base intact. If we move quickly, we can have a preliminary valuation within 3 weeks. I sat with that for a moment. 30 years of work, dozens of employees, national contracts, hundreds of thousands of hours poured into something that bore my name. I'd always believed I'd pass it to Marissa one day. That maybe, once she was ready, we'd share something more than holiday dinners, an obligation. That maybe I'd see a version of myself in her, strong and steady, steering something I'd built into the future. But she didn't want it. She wanted the results, not the responsibility. I want it kept quiet, I said firmly. No leaks, not until the papers are signed. Giselle nodded. Absolutely. I'll handle the brokerage connections myself. We spent the next hour drafting the confidentiality terms and beginning the prep documents. I asked to review every step, every clause, every buyer profile. If I was going to step away from what I'd built, I wasn't going to do it with my eyes closed. When we finished, Giselle folded her hands and studied me for a long moment. "Loretta," she said, "do you realize what you're doing?" "Yes," I said. "I'm removing the safety net." For them? For me. That afternoon, I went back to the office. It was strange walking the halls of Monroe Strategic Group with this quiet finality humming beneath my feet. The staff smiled at me like it was any other Tuesday. My assistant asked if I wanted lunch ordered in. The interns were debating budget line items over takeout salads. No one knew, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I sat at my desk and stared at the framed mission statement on the wall. I'd written it in 1995 during a thunderstorm, with Franklin asleep upstairs and Marissa still young enough to leave notes in my lunch bag. We grow what others walk away from. That had always been my motto, in business and in life. But now, for the first time, I was choosing to walk away myself. I picked up the phone and called Ethan. "Hey, Mrs. Monroe," he said. His voice was friendly, clueless. "What's up?" "I'm reviewing vendor contracts for the commercial properties," I said, "considering bids from new landscaping companies." There was a long pause. Sure. We can negotiate if needed. Maybe bring the rate down 10%? This isn't about the rate, Ethan. It's about reevaluating all options. Another pause. Shorter this time, but tenser. Got it. I hung up and immediately called the 3 small business clients who used Marissa for bookkeeping. I didn't give details. I didn't explain. Just, We're restructuring referral partnerships. You'll need to transition bookkeeping services in the next 60 days. That night, Marissa called me. Her voice was tight, nervous. Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you're not referring bookkeepers anymore. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, I said calmly. I'm just simplifying the structure of my business. But I rely on those clients. That's my income. I'm sure you'll find other opportunities, I replied. You're capable. There was a beat of silence, thick and heavy. Is something going on? She asked. You've been different lately. I'm just tired, I said softly, tired of carrying more than my share. We ended the call soon after. I stared at the flower on my shelf, the same one I hadn't thrown away, not because I cherished it, because I needed to see it, needed the reminder. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't write a letter. I didn't post a dramatic goodbye online. I just changed course. The next 3 weeks unfolded like clockwork. Valuation meetings, buyer interviews, financial audits. I didn't tell a soul. I still smiled at the office, still approved bonuses, still brought cookies to the Friday meeting, but every step I took was a step away. Then one day, my phone rang. It was Ethan. Hey, so I heard from someone at the chamber that Monroe might be selling. Is that true? My stomach tightened. People talk, Ethan. You know how it is. But you'd tell us, right? If it was happening. I mean, this would affect our lives, contracts, stability, family. If and when I make a decision, I said, you'll be informed appropriately. I ended the call and looked out the window. The harbor was calm, no wind, no boats, just light rippling across the surface like glass that had never been cracked. I had made my choice, not to punish, but to free myself from a job, from an identity, from a weight I no longer wanted to carry, and no one, not even my daughter, was going to stop me. The rumor reached them faster than I'd expected. It wasn't through a press release or a slip from my assistant, or even gossip at the Chamber of Commerce. I'd kept this process airtight, discreet. But Charleston is a small city when it wants to be, and whispers travel faster when money is involved. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing transition documents with Giselle when my phone buzzed with Ethan's name. Mrs. Monroe, he began, voice straining for casual. I heard a strange thing today. A colleague mentioned that Monroe Strategic Group might be on the market? You would have told us, right? I looked out the window before I answered. The clouds were thick, low over the harbor. If and when I make major decisions about my company, I said evenly, you'll be informed in the appropriate way. There was a long pause. Then came the tone. Sweet, pressured, entitled. But Loretta, we're family. I ended the call without another word. The next morning, I went into the office later than usual. I'd stopped for coffee and taken the long way, letting myself enjoy the quiet of a city not yet fully awake. I needed a few minutes of peace before the next stage of letting go began. But peace was not what waited for me. As I opened the front door to my home, mind you, I heard the faint hum of voices coming from down the hall. My stomach dropped. I followed the sound to my office. There, sitting at my desk, was Marissa. She wasn't crying. She wasn't flustered. She looked determined, her laptop open, papers spread out across the oak surface, like she owned the place. Marissa, I said, my voice low but sharp, what are you doing here? She flinched, just slightly, but she recovered quickly. I came to water the plants, she said, standing up too fast. I thought you were still at your meeting. I don't have houseplants, I said coldly. Try again. She blinked. The lies were unraveling too quickly for her to keep up. Okay, she admitted, breath catching. Ethan said you might have some old tax documents he needed. I was just trying to help him out. I walked to the desk and picked up the printed term sheet she'd left unfolded. It was from the buyer's legal team. Confidential, watermarked, and none of her business. This is private, I said, slowly folding the paper. You had no right to be in here. You weren't going to tell me, she said, the panic finally breaking through. You were going to sell the company behind our backs. I looked at her. My daughter, 35 years old, standing in my home, rifling through my paperwork, pretending to be my assistant on a call I hadn't even authorized. Behind your backs? I repeated quietly. Marissa, this company is mine, not yours, not Ethan's, mine. I don't owe you an explanation. She stepped closer, eyes flashing. This affects us, Mom. Ethan's contracts, my clients. It all connects back to Monroe Strategic Group. You can't just tear it out from under us like this. Like this? I said, my voice rising finally. You mean quietly, without a scene? Without one of your tantrums about how I'm abandoning the family while you sip champagne in someone else's backyard? Her lips parted, but no sound came. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something I should have seen years ago. She didn't recognize me as a person. She saw me as infrastructure, as dependable and invisible as the pipes that brought water to her kitchen sink. Do you love me? I asked her. Or do you love what I do for you? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. And that silence, that long, shameful silence, was the only answer I needed. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. I didn't want to answer it, but something told me I needed to hear what was coming next. Loretta, he said, skipping the pretense. We need to sit down, as a family. This decision impacts all of us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Instead, I said plainly, this is a business. Not a community fundraiser, not a family trust. You've had years of support from me, support I gave freely but never promised forever. There was a long pause. Then his voice dipped into that familiar place, manipulation disguised as concern. Are you sure this isn't about Mother's Day? I almost laughed. You think this is about a flower? I said. This is about the fact that for 15 years I've been subsidizing a lifestyle you both call independence. Ethan began to speak again, but I ended the call. Marissa was staring at me now, as if I'd become someone she couldn't quite recognize, someone she'd never taken the time to know. You're punishing us, she said, over a misunderstanding. I walked over to the desk and began stacking the documents she'd carelessly scattered. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm reclaiming my time, my life, my name. She sat down in the guest chair, the one she'd never used until now, and her voice turned soft, almost childlike. Mom, we were just trying to make things work. We didn't know you were unhappy. Unhappy. That word felt too small, too simple, like describing a hurricane as windy. I've been invisible, I said, in my own home, in your life. I've been generous to a fault, and in return, I've been treated like a backup plan. She started to cry quietly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I replied. There's a difference. She wiped her eyes. What do we do now? I placed the final folder in my briefcase. You figure out who you are without my checkbook, I said. You start over, on your own terms. Will you forgive me? She asked, standing up. I met her eyes. I will always love you, but I will not keep enabling you. And then I walked her to the door. I didn't hug her. I didn't say call me later. I simply said, you need to leave. She did. Slowly, tears still falling, no more words left. I sat on the sofa after she was gone, the silence loud again, but this time, different. It didn't ache. It breathed. It felt like oxygen. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis, the next request, the next emotional invoice hidden inside a phone call. I was alone, but I was free. And that, I was starting to realize, wasn't something to fear. It was something to protect. The morning after Marissa left my house in tears, my phone began to ring. It was 6:47 a.m. The sun hadn't even touched the side of the house yet, and already her name lit up the screen like a warning light. I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I didn't touch my phone. It was still ringing when I poured the second cup. By the time I'd finished breakfast, there had been 12 missed calls, all from her. I knew without even checking that there were voicemails too, pleading, bargaining, maybe even blaming. I didn't listen. I already knew the rhythm. At 8:02, I picked up the 13th call. "Mom," she said immediately, her voice a cracked whisper. "Please, we need to talk. I can't breathe. Ethan hasn't slept. You can't just blow up our life like this." I sipped my coffee. "We talked yesterday, Marissa. I was very clear." "This isn't just a disagreement," she said, starting to cry again. "This is our home, our income, our future," I let her cry. I didn't comfort, I didn't explain. "I want you to understand something," I said calmly. "You've built a life on the assumption that I would always say yes. That ends now." "But we're family." "So am I said. "I'm part of this family, and I'm tired of acting like I don't matter." She hung up. 10 minutes later, she called again. Then Ethan called. Then she called twice more. By noon, the call log showed 34 missed calls. Some were voicemails with quiet apologies. Others were desperate. One accused me of abandoning them in the worst financial moment of their lives. Another said I was acting like a stranger. One ended with the question, "Do you even love us anymore?" At 1:13 p.m., a text came in from Ethan. "I'm having chest pains, stress-related. If I land in the hospital, it's on you, just saying." I stared at that message for a full minute, stunned. This was the line they were crossing now, weaponizing guilt like it was currency. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my business vendor dashboard and reviewed the current contracts for landscaping. Ethan's company still held all 3 commercial properties. I submitted termination notices on each, 30-day grace period, no further negotiation. Then I sent emails to the clients Marissa still worked with, informing them of an immediate end to referral partnerships. I included 2 other bookkeeping contacts in the Charleston area for their convenience. I signed it all professionally, kindly, clearly. And that was it. The cord had been cut. It felt strange at first, like standing up too quickly after sitting too long. A little lightheaded, a little dizzy, but also lighter. The next few days passed in an odd kind of stillness. I went into the office, approved final transition paperwork with Giselle, and held my usual Friday check-in with staff. No one at Monroe knew anything yet, not officially. The sale would be finalized in 2 weeks. I'd planned to stay in Charleston through the closing, but when I woke up Sunday morning to another voicemail from Marissa crying and asking if she'd ever see me again, I knew I needed physical distance too. So I packed a weekend bag, then I packed another, and by Tuesday morning, I was gone. I didn't go far, just a few hours northwest to a place that had always felt quiet and unfinished, Lake Keowee. Years ago, Franklin and I had talked about buying a little place here when we retired, but life happened, clients happened, Marissa happened. I found a white cottage on a hill with chipped shutters and an overgrown garden. The realtor told me it had sat empty for 9 months. It had a view of the water, a screened porch, and a wood-burning fireplace. I bought it in cash. No fanfare, no announcement, just paperwork, a key, and a deep exhale I hadn't felt in years. The first morning there, I didn't check my phone. I put on Franklin's old flannel, stepped out barefoot into the dew, and stood in the silence until the birds made it feel full. There was no email to answer, no fire to put out, no favor to fulfill. Just a garden full of weeds, a fridge full of groceries I picked myself, and a stack of books I'd never had time to read. By week 2, I'd ripped up a patch of soil and planted Roma tomatoes. I didn't know if they'd take in that rocky earth, but I wanted to try. Not because someone needed me to, not because it was expected, but because it was mine. In the evenings, I sat on the porch with a glass of red wine and watched the lake shift from blue to violet as the sun set. Sometimes a neighbor waved, sometimes no one passed at all. I liked both equally. One afternoon, I went into town and signed up for a pottery class. The woman behind the counter smiled and asked, "Are you new around here?" "Yes," I said, "and it's the first time in a long time I've been new at anything." She laughed. It felt easy, safe. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't a mother first. I wasn't a wife, or a boss, or the backbone holding up everyone else's dream. I was Loretta, just Loretta. My phone still buzzed, of course. Marissa's number, Ethan's. Unfamiliar numbers, too, likely friends trying to mediate or extend olive branches on their behalf. I didn't block anyone, but I didn't answer either, because answering would mean re-entering a dynamic I had just worked so hard to step out of. It would mean cracking the door I had finally closed, and I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. One day I walked past the mirror in the entryway and caught my own reflection. I looked different. Not younger, not stronger, but visible to myself. That was something, wasn't it? For decades, I had measured my worth in how much I gave, in how often I said yes, in how many people needed me. Now I was measuring by how deeply I could sit with myself and feel whole. And slowly, that was becoming enough. By the third month at the lake, the silence no longer felt sharp. It had softened, stretched, and settled in my bones like something earned. I'd learned to live without the buzzing of my phone, without the need to explain myself, without the steady rhythm of obligation ticking through my calendar. I filled my mornings with pottery class at the community center, where I spent more time laughing than shaping anything remotely symmetrical. I joined the Wednesday night book club at Harper's bookstore, where the wine was warm, the opinions were louder than the plot, and no one asked what I used to do for a living. That was the best part. No one here introduced me as Marissa's mom or the woman who paid for everyone else's life. I was just Loretta, with dirt under my nails and clay on my elbows. No backstory, no expectations. It was the first time in my adult life that I wasn't essential to someone else's survival, and I was learning that being essential and being appreciated were not the same thing. The cottage was quiet, but it felt like mine. I painted the guest room yellow. I grew tomatoes. I finally took Franklin's old records out of the boxes and played them without crying. Life wasn't exciting, but it was mine. Peaceful, chosen. Still, there were things I hadn't said. Wounds that hadn't quite closed. I thought of Marissa often, but not with anger. Not anymore. Just with a strange mixture of grief and distance. Like remembering someone from a different lifetime. Then, one crisp morning in early October, I checked the mailbox at the end of the gravel drive and found a letter. Handwritten. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. Marissa's. Careful. Slower than usual. Not her usual scrawl dashed between appointments. I stood at the kitchen counter for a long time, holding the envelope. Part of me didn't want to open it. Another part needed to. I finally slid a knife beneath the flap and unfolded the pages. Dear Mom, I've been trying to write this letter for weeks, maybe months, but I didn't know how to start. There's so much I want to say, and none of it feels big enough. First, I'm sorry. Not the performative kind of sorry I've offered you 1,000 times. Not the kind that comes attached to a favor or a condition. Just a real, clean sorry. I know now what I did. I didn't see you. I saw the things you did for me. I saw the safety net, the house, the checks, the endless yeses, but I didn't see you. I didn't see the woman behind all of it, the one who was tired, grieving, probably lonely, and still kept giving like it was a reflex. I thought love was what you could give me. I didn't understand that love was also noticing what you need. That's on me. You didn't sell the company to punish me. You sold it to save yourself. I get that now. I hate that it took me this long. Ethan and I are separating. The business went under, and once the money was gone, we realized there wasn't much left, at least nothing honest. I've taken a job as a teaching assistant at the elementary school. It's not glamorous, but the kids don't care who I used to be. They just care that I show up. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm earning something that's mine. I'm not writing to ask for anything. Truly, I don't want money. I don't want you to undo anything. I just wanted to say, I understand, and I'm sorry. I know you may not respond. I know I have to earn trust again, not demand it. That's okay. I just hope you're happy. I hope you feel light. You deserve that. Love, Marissa P.S. I kept the plastic flower. It's on my kitchen windowsill. Every time I see it, I think about the look on your face that day. And I remember what I broke. I'm sorry it took me this long to want to fix it. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it slowly and placed it in the drawer where I kept things I couldn't quite let go of. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to call her. I just stood there for a long time, hand resting on the counter, watching the steam rise from the cup of tea I'd forgotten to sip. There was a time in my life when I would have driven straight to her house the moment I read those words, wrapped her up in my arms, told her we'd figure it out. But that time had passed. Some wounds don't close just because someone says sorry. Some wounds need space, time, stillness. I wasn't ready to open the door again, but I was grateful she had knocked. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop and reviewed the final legal documents I'd been putting off. The last piece of unfinished business. I had already paid off Marissa and Ethan's mortgage quietly, months ago, not as a gift, but as a parting gesture, a clean final closing of a long and heavy tab. What I hadn't done yet was finish setting up the trust funds for my grandchildren. Not for Ethan and Marissa, for the children, for who they might become if given the chance to stand on their own feet one day. I worked with Giselle to make it airtight. They would receive the money at age 18. No early access, no parental control, no influence. Just a key to something their grandmother left behind, with faith that they might use it wisely. It wasn't a second chance for my daughter. It was a first chance for the next generation. After the paperwork was signed, I walked down to the dock with a blanket and my book. The water shimmered like glass. Somewhere across the lake, someone was playing music, faint, distant, just loud enough to remind me the world kept turning. I thought about writing Marissa back. I even pulled out my stationery once or twice, but I didn't send anything. Not yet. Some bridges can't be rebuilt the same way they were before. Sometimes they need new foundations, poured with truth and choice, not guilt and routine. Maybe one day I'll write her. Maybe one day I'll invite her to sit beside me on this porch and we'll talk, not about money or responsibility or who failed who, but about what comes next now that everything has changed. But not today. Today, I was still healing. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing that process for anyone else's comfort. I never did throw away that plastic flower. It still sits on the shelf in my little white cottage, not because I treasure it, but because it reminds me of the moment I woke up, the moment I stopped trying to earn love through sacrifice, the moment I understood that being needed is not the same as being cherished. At 71, I learned something it took me a lifetime to see. Sometimes, the bravest thing a mother can do is step back, not to hurt, but to heal. Not to abandon, but to reclaim. These days, my life is quiet, but it's mine. I grow tomatoes that don't always survive the frost. I burn more pottery than I keep. I read books just because I want to, not because anyone told me I should. And that freedom, that unremarkable, beautiful freedom, has become my quiet victory. Maybe you've lived a version of this story. Maybe you're still in it. Or maybe you're just now realizing that your worth was never supposed to be measured in how much you gave away. If this story found you in a tender place, you're not alone. I see you, and I hope you'll stay with us. This is Renvenge Zinnia, where stories long buried finally speak in the voice of those who lived them. Subscribe if you believe that sometimes the best revenge is peace. You've earned it.